In the span of just 3 days, Notre Dame landed a commitment from one of its top defensive back prospects in the class of 2025, but then they had to watch their top-rated defensive commit flip to Michigan. So what does it all mean? And are these two events related to one another? I break it all down next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm Tyler Wojciak and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and there's been a slight change of plans. I'm releasing this episode Monday evening instead of Tuesday morning because we've got some breaking news to talk about, and we'll get to all of that in just a second. But first, I wanted to remind you that this show is free and available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. No matter where you're tuning in from today, though, I'm grateful that you're here, but I'd encourage you to please hit that subscribe button if you have not done so already. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, let's get into it. It has been a very busy couple days for Notre Dame on the recruiting trail with some good news, but some bad news as well. And I'm going to break down the what, the how, what it all means, all of that in today's show. So I'm not calling this an emergency podcast, but I guess it's like a semi-emergency pod because I'm releasing it one night earlier. And let's start with the good news, right? On Friday, four-star safety JaDon Blair publicly announced his commitment to Notre Dame over Michigan, Penn State, Florida State, Louisville, and some other schools as well. And this was and is a huge win for the Irish. Blair is ranked just outside the top 150 players nationally on the 24/7 Sports Composite. He's listed as the 14th ranked safety in the class. He's got freakish size for a safety. He's listed at 6'4", 190 pounds, and his great lengths. And given his size and length, you're going to start to see and hear a lot of Kyle Hamilton comparisons with JaDon Blair. And look, he's got great size, but he is not the prospect that Kyle Hamilton was coming out of high school. He's still very good, but that's perfectly okay to not be Kyle Hamilton because there are very few prospects who came out of high school who are as talented and as physically gifted as Kyle Hamilton. But given his size, that is the type of player that JaDon Blair aspires to be. And I think that the role of Kyle Hamilton, his time at Notre Dame, and even his family did have a role in JaDon Blair eventually committing to Notre Dame. But at the time that JaDon Blair committed to Notre Dame, he was the 6th defensive back in the class of 2025, and it was shaping up to be the best class of defensive backs that Notre Dame had signed in literal decades. But just 2 days later, on Sunday, word started to spread that Notre Dame was about to lose one of those defensive back commits, Ivan Taylor, who also happens to be their highest-rated defensive commit in the entire class. And when the rumors started on Sunday, all signs were pointing to him flipping to Michigan. Then on Monday, it became official. On Monday morning, it seemed like a foregone conclusion, and I think that was maybe one of the only surprises in all of this was how quickly that this story was moving. And then Monday afternoon, he made the announcement. It became official, and there's really no sugarcoating it for Notre Dame. This is a huge loss. Taylor was the second highest rated commit in the class. He was one of 4 guys in the class ranked inside the top 100, and he plays a position of serious need for Notre Dame, especially after they came up short in the past 2 cycles at the safety position last year. They added 3 guys, one of which is Kennedy Urlacher, who could move to linebacker. The other 2 are developmental prospects in Tate Johnson and Tayron Benny-Powell. In the year before, Adon Schuler and Ben Minnick were 2 more developmental prospects as well. They missed out on Peyton Bowen. They signed Brandon Hellman, who was going to play safety at Notre Dame, and then there was an admissions issue there. So then he ended up at Michigan as well. So really, safety was a huge priority for Notre Dame in this cycle, and the fact that they had Taylor and Blair committed at one time was really exciting for Notre Dame. But then Ivan Taylor decided to flip, and still the class is really, really good. And I'm going to explain, the impact of these decisions and what it all means for Notre Dame in the next segment. But really, I want to focus on Ivan Taylor's decision to flip because it's not necessarily shocking news. Ever since Taylor decided to take an official visit to Alabama back in June, everyone knew that his commitment was up in the air. It was no longer a foregone conclusion that Ivan Taylor was going to sign the dotted line with Notre Dame. And really, to be honest with you, this all started when Chris O'Leary, the former Notre Dame safeties coach, left Notre Dame to join the Los Angeles Chargers. Yes, I understand that Michigan has a new staff too, but Chris O'Leary was absolutely integral in the recruitment of Ivan Taylor as well as JaDon Blair. JaDon Blair even said to Tom Loy of 24/7 Sports that once Chris O'Leary left Notre Dame really fell down on his list. O'Leary was the primary recruiter for JaDon Blair, and they had a great relationship. Everything was going great, and then he left, and then Notre Dame fell down. But then Mike Mickens, Marcus Freeman, and the Notre Dame coaching staff continued to recruit him. They made up some ground. Mike Mickens and JaDon Blair developed a really strong connection, and then ultimately Blair decided to commit to Notre Dame. And I think a very similar thing happened with Ivan Taylor. Once Taylor left, once O'Leary left, even though Ivan Taylor was still committed to Notre Dame, they had some serious ground to make up, and they tried really, really hard. And it felt like there was a point in time when Notre Dame was back in the lead and everything was going to be good with Ivan Taylor. And then it was announced that he was going to visit Alabama. And after that, it was like, okay, now this is totally wide open. But then Taylor visited Notre Dame, and then he went to Michigan not long after that. And there was a time where it wasn't like Notre Dame was super optimistic or that Ivan Taylor decided to shut his recruitment down, but things were certainly trending for Notre Dame, at least for a little bit. It felt like people who were around Ivan Taylor were optimistic that he would eventually sign with Notre Dame. You didn't hear about any more official visits planned, but then everything seemed to change once JaDon Blair announced his commitment to Notre Dame. Like I said, Blair committed Friday. Then on Sunday, all these rumors come out about Ivan Taylor to Michigan. And then Monday, it's official. So what exactly happened there? This could all be a coincidence. It could absolutely be a coincidence that JaDon Blair decided to commit to Notre Dame, who is a safety, who is a highly rated safety. And then just a couple days later, another highly rated safety at Notre Dame decides that he would like to go elsewhere. This is not a shock that Ivan Taylor decided to flip. But the timing is curious. And to be honest with you, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think Ivan Taylor's decision to flip to Michigan is directly related to JaDon Blair's commitment to Notre Dame. And to be clear, this is just my read on the situation. I could very well be wrong about this. I'm not reporting anything. Nobody has told me this is or this is not what happened, but this is just my guess based on the information that's out there. And it's not just that Blair committed to Notre Dame. But in Taylor's mind, I think that this is sort of the final straw. He saw that Notre Dame added another top safety prospect, and maybe he felt slighted or maybe he felt disrespected because they already had two safety commits in the class with Ivan Taylor and Ethan Long. So he realized, hey, 3 is a crowd. He wanted out. Again, I'm not stating this as a fact, but situations like this happen all the time in life. Think about it. We know that Ivan Taylor has been wavering for about a month now, at least publicly. Maybe he's been wavering way longer than that, and at the moment that Chris O'Leary left, he was like, yeah, I'm ready to leave. But if you're wavering out of commitment, you're probably looking for reasons to justify your decision to decommit. It's like in real life, if you commit to going to a party or an event and you realize later on that you really don't want to go, you're probably going to look for a valid excuse to not go. It's easier to have an excuse than to just be honest with the person who is hosting and say, yeah, I really don't want to go to that anymore. We've all been there. Like you commit to going to a person's birthday party, you don't really know them that well. And as you get closer and closer to the day of, you realize you don't want to go to that, but you don't really have a good excuse. And then you're like, oh, what am I going to say? Am I really just going to be brutally honest and be like, hey, I don't really want to go to your birthday party. I don't really like you that much to spend my time going to your place and celebrating you. But then all of a sudden they tell you, hey, the party is on the opposite end of town and it's after work on a Friday. And then you're like, boom, there's my out. You tell them you can't make it anymore because of traffic. It's too far of a drive. You're not going to make it in time because you're going to have to work late. Look, it's not the best move, and you could probably just figure out a way to make it if you really wanted to, but you don't really want to, and this provided you an in that makes backtracking on your commitment a little bit more justified. Obviously, the stakes in this situation that I just presented are not quite as high as Ivan Taylor deciding to flip his commitment from Notre Dame to Michigan. I'm certainly not saying that this is an apples-to-apples comparison, but when I just think about the timeline of events here and the fact that we all knew that Ivan Taylor was wavering, and then all of a sudden, the moment that Notre Dame adds a commitment from another highly ranked player at the same position that Ivan Taylor plays, and then just 2 days later, Taylor flips his commitment to Michigan, that just... there's just too much there for me to completely ignore and be like, oh, must have just been a coincidence. And I'm not even faulting Taylor. Like, I'm sure that he had other reasons why he didn't want to go to Notre Dame too. I'm not just saying that this is all based on JaDon Blair's decision and he's afraid of competition or anything like that. I'm just pointing out the facts and saying I think that this played an integral part in Ivan Taylor's decision to leave. He was probably looking for reasons to decommit to Notre Dame or decommit from Notre Dame anyway. And the fact that the staff recruited another highly ranked player at his position probably rubbed him the wrong way. And this is sort of the final straw and one of the reasons why Taylor felt it was time to move on. And even if Blair didn't pick Notre Dame, there's still a good chance that Ivan Taylor could eventually flip his commitment. So it's not just on this, but it does remind me a lot of the Dante Moore, CJ Carr situation, because whether Dante or anyone will ever say it publicly, like Dante Moore was a silent commit to Notre Dame at one point in time. It's funny because when he was being recruited, everyone's like, oh no, there's no silent commitment with Dante Moore. And then as soon as he committed elsewhere, everyone's like, yeah, there'd been a silent commitment this whole time. But anyway, Dante Moore was silently committed to Notre Dame, but Moore was taking other official visits. He wouldn't commit to Notre Dame publicly. So then Notre Dame added another top quarterback prospect from the state of Michigan, no less, which is the same state that Dante Moore is from. Then Moore played the disrespect card and basically cut Notre Dame out of his recruitment. Now, there's plenty of reasons why this didn't make sense. Partially, actually, I should say mainly because CJ Carr was not even in Dante Moore's class. He was in the class after him, and the staff still prioritized Dante Moore in a huge way. But Dante Moore had already been giving off all these signs that he wasn't going to commit to Notre Dame anyway, but then they make this one other move at his same position. He's like, oh, well, now I'm gone, right? It's like trying to put the blame on someone else. That decision didn't make sense at the time, and it kind of feels the same way with Ivan Taylor. Like if it really just did come down to this, if Ivan Taylor was like, oh, you recruited another highly ranked safety to come play for Notre Dame in addition to another safety that we already have in this class, I'm out. Like that doesn't really make sense, because there are two safeties on the field at the same time. And Notre Dame has missed out on a bunch of safeties before. They missed out on Peyton Bowen, Brandon Hillman, and now Ivan Taylor as well. So it doesn't really make sense, and I'm not justifying if this really was the reason that Ivan Taylor decided to decommit. I'm just saying that there's a good chance that this is how these events played out, in my opinion. Again, could totally be wrong about this. Maybe it is just a total coincidence that Blair committed and then Ivan Taylor decided to flip elsewhere. But really, the only surprise in all of this to me is that he made the decision so quickly. Like I thought for sure Ivan Taylor would take his recruitment into the fall and make a decision later on after he was able to take some official visits, or unofficial visits, I should say, during the season. But it is what it is. Ivan Taylor decided to go to Michigan. I think he's an extremely talented player, but I also think that JaDon Blair is an extremely talented player. And I would never say that Notre Dame should have had to pick one and not the other. Like I definitely do not subscribe to the idea that the Notre Dame coaching staff should have recognized this and said like, hey, they're going to turn down JaDon Blair, who's a really good player and a great Notre Dame fit, because it might improve their chances of retaining Ivan Taylor. No, I don't think that would have been a good decision at all, because I think Ivan Taylor was wavering and he was going to figure out a reason to decommit to Notre Dame one way or another, because he's sort of been feeling this way for a while. And this just happened to be it. So it all happened back to back. And this is just the nature of recruiting. It is an absolute whirlwind. And if you follow this day to day, you've just got to hang on to your seats, because it is a roller coaster. And there's going to be a lot more twists and turns the rest of this recruiting cycle, and really for all recruiting cycles to come. So what impact will these decisions have on Notre Dame's class of 2025? That's coming up right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And with great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Whether you've been planning to go to a game for weeks, or if you're feeling spontaneous and want to hit up the nearby ballpark, Gametime is the perfect place for you. It is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy, but my favorite thing about Gametime is the pricing shows your total costs up front, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, now let's take a look at the impact of JaDon Blair's commitment and Ivan Taylor's decommitment on Notre Dame's class of 2025. And the first thing that stands out to me is that JaDon's commitment has become way more important with the loss of Taylor. Whereas like a couple weeks ago when Notre Dame had 5 defensive backs come into the class and they were in the running for JaDon Blair, I said, Blair's kind of a luxury for Notre Dame at this point. They've got Ivan Taylor, a highly rated safety. They've got Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary, 2 extremely talented cornerbacks. And then they've got Creed Thomas and Ethan Long, 2 more developmental guys, but I think have high upside as well. Like the class is in really, really good shape. And then you add Blair, that's just like the rich getting richer, right? But now that Taylor left, it's so perfect that they got Blair because it is like a perfect fill-in. Now, obviously, it would have been nice if they had both, but JaDon Blair is really, really good. I mentioned his size earlier. He's got great length and range. JaDon Blair has also been playing football for basically his entire life. His dad says that JaDon has been playing tackle football since he was 4 years old. Personally, I think that's insane. Okay, and I started playing tackle football when I was really young. Honestly, younger than most people. I think I started playing tackle when I was 8 years old. And to be honest with you, my experience wasn't super great because I was a little kid out there. And I always felt like, when I watched old home videos or something like that, literally, it's just these little kids that just like collide and then just fall backwards. Like I honestly think that it's better to play flag football for longer because you actually learn more about technique and what it takes to play football before you put on the pads, because obviously you need to learn how to tackle, but when you're that little, it's not really tackling. It's just collisions and they fall over. But somehow JaDon Blair's dad found a tackle football league for him to play in when he was 4 years old. Maybe he's playing with a bunch of older kids. But look, I'm not going to question the parenting methods here because obviously it has worked out for JaDon. He has great football instincts because he's been playing the game for so long, and he's a good athlete. Now, he's not going to blow you away with his 40 time or anything like that. He's not a burner at his size, but I think his footwork at the back end of the defense is what separates him. Like when you get some guys in high school that are this tall, 6'4", 190, sometimes they don't really have the best footwork. They're just really long, and they kind of have these super long strides. They're able to get from point A to point B rather quickly once they get going. But considering how tall and long he is, he actually has really good footwork and can move around well in short space. That is not super typical of guys of that size. He's also a very willing tackler. To be honest, when you watch it, like JaDon Blair looks like he's trying to decapitate people out there. He is certainly going to have to work on his tackling form once he gets to college because that's just not going to work. You can't just try to just annihilate every receiver or every running back you see because he's just so much bigger than everyone else in the high school field. So, like, I get it. Like, when I play NCAA football or when I play Madden, I guess it's going to be EA Sports College Football 25, which comes out in a week, which I'm super excited about. I love just using the truck stick button because it's more fun, right? If you can just absolutely decleat someone in a video game in real life, personally, I never had that ability. I was never just decleating people out there. Not nearly big enough for all of that. But if you have that ability, I get it, right? It's probably a lot more fun. But he needs to learn how to wrap up a little bit better. He comes downhill in a hurry, and he wants to stick his nose in there. And that's really great because usually it seems like the best tackling safeties are like the undersized guys who know they can't cover as well, so they need to really get after it in the box. Like some of Notre Dame's best tackling safeties are like Tom Zibikowski, Colin McCarthy. Like Zibikowski was a ball hawk. I wouldn't really consider Colin McCarthy that at all, but like JaDon Blair can cover a bunch of ground as like a cover safety, but he can also make some plays in the run game as well. So I think that's really exciting. If you're watching his film and you think about what he could do at Notre Dame, I don't think that he's necessarily like a plug-and-play safety once he gets on campus. I think he's going to need some time to sort of hone all his skills and his fundamentals. And I think that's sort of the biggest loss with Ivan Taylor is I thought Ivan Taylor was more like a more college-ready player coming out of high school than JaDon Blair is. There is certainly a chance that JaDon Blair is a much better college player than Ivan Taylor, even though that Ivan Taylor is ranked higher right now. These guys are both extremely talented, and recruiting rankings get it wrong, but I think that Taylor is more talented, more college ready. His dad is also Ike Taylor, who is a Steelers great, so that's not really that shocking. He also plays in Florida against some really quality competition, and even though Blair's from North Carolina, he plays some really good quality competition as well. Like the high school football in Florida is just a little bit different, so that's why I felt a little bit better about Ivan Taylor playing a little bit earlier, but still, JaDon Blair, big commitment for Notre Dame, especially important now that Taylor is gone. But it also makes Ethan Long's commitment that much more important as well. And I think Ethan Long has been somewhat forgotten in this class, and he didn't even commit that long ago. He committed in January of 2024. So it's not like he's been around this class for like a year and a half and everyone just kind of got bored with him. Like, the problem is for Ethan Long, guys who are ranked higher than him at the defensive back position, like Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary and then JaDon Blair, like all of those commitments came after Ethan Long. So then all the fans got excited about them. And I think there's reasons to be excited about what Ethan Long can do as well. He's from Greenwich, Connecticut. He actually went to the same high school that current Notre Dame athletic director Pete Bavacqua went to. He's 6'2", 185. He's not really ranked that high on the recruiting rankings. He's the 40th ranked safety, but I think part of that has to do with the fact that he's playing in Connecticut. I used to live in Connecticut, not necessarily a college football hotbed up there, but he's a developmental player that Notre Dame really needs to hit on now. He's one of the more underrated prospects in the class. And now in losing out on Taylor, I think Notre Dame is really losing out on a guy who gives time for Ethan Long. Like I said, Notre Dame added 3 developmental guys last year with Tay Johnson, Tabron Benny-Powell, and Kennedy Urlacher. Notre Dame is going to have to replace both their safeties after this season. Xavier Watts is going to go to the NFL. Rod Hurd has been playing in college for I think 2 decades at this point, so he's going to exhaust his eligibility after this season. And there's going to be a serious competition at safety. I think Adon Schuler probably is the best track to starting next year for Notre Dame. He's probably going to be the first safety off the bench this year. And how maybe he even ends up starting over Rod Hurd. That would be surprising to me, given Hurd's experience. But who knows? Maybe Adon Schuler takes a big leap going into his sophomore season. Luke Talich, the former walk-on, is also a player who's going to compete for some playing time this year at safety as well. Ben Minnick. And then maybe one of these young guys really surprises some people in fall camp. It happens. Benjamin Morrison was certainly a big surprise to everyone when he didn't early enroll, and then he was a starter for Notre Dame at corner after just a few weeks, beating out Clarence Lewis, who started at the position for years before. If Tay Johnson ends up doing that, I would certainly be surprised. I'm not saying it's probable, but it's not impossible. But Notre Dame is going to have to look at the transfer portal at safety after the season. They were probably going to have to do it anyway, but now that Taylor is out, it's an absolute necessity because there's just too many young guys at the position who just don't have much experience. And even if Adon Schuler and Luke Talich get some good time this year as reserves, it's too risky to just let them go and try to start next season without actually making an attempt at the transfer portal. So to me, I think the most frustrating part about all of this is that this is the third straight high-quality safety that has flipped from Notre Dame. And as I've ranted so many times before on this podcast, safety recruiting has really been subpar for Notre Dame over the past really 7 cycles dating back to 2017. There were 2 years in there where they didn't even sign a single safety. And I felt like over the past 3 cycles, they've just been trying to make up ground for that. And they had Peyton Bowen at one point, they had Brandon Hillman, and now they had Ivan Taylor. 3 guys who look like they could be serious difference makers at the college level, all decommit. And it's extremely frustrating, even though decommitments happen all the time in college football for a million different reasons. Like, it always stings, but it really stings in this place because it's a player as talented as Ivan Taylor. And let's be honest, it's never fun losing your commitment, losing one of your top prospects to a rival. And there's plenty of Notre Dame fans who like to get into it with Michigan fans on social media. I see it all the time. I stay away from that because it is just a lose-lose situation, in my opinion. But hey, Michigan fans are going to get their jokes off. There's really nothing Notre Dame fans can do about it. You can talk about the fact that JaDon Blair committed to Notre Dame over Michigan, but sometimes we're just going to have to take it. I think this is one of those times. Losing out on Ivan Taylor is a big loss for Notre Dame. It's going to have a big impact on the class of 2025 and beyond. But this is it, man. This is big boy college football. Even Georgia, even Alabama, sometimes they lose guys who are committed in their class to their rivals, and it sucks in the moment, but you just got to keep going after other top prospects and try to figure it out because that's what you have to do. It's not really a choice. So where does Notre Dame go from here in the class of 2025? The answer is coming up next. Now that Taylor is out the door, I think there's a lot of questions about what Notre Dame is going to do at defensive back because they still have 5 defensive backs right now in the class of 2025, but I do think that they're going to be pretty aggressive trying to fill Taylor's spot with another DB. The first choice might be Brandon Logan, and he's got a very interesting recruitment. If you haven't heard of him, Logan is from Fort Wayne, and he's currently committed to Vanderbilt to play baseball. If you look at his recruiting rankings, you're not going to find a lot because he's committed to play baseball, and it looks like that is the sport that he wants to play in college. Notre Dame offered him a preferred walk-on spot on the football team when they first talked to him with a scholarship to play baseball. It's kind of similar to the Jordan Faison situation where he was initially on lacrosse scholarship, but he was going to be a walk-on on the football team, and then they had to put him on football scholarship in order for him to play during the season. I don't quite understand all the inner workings there, but that is just what happened with Jordan Faison. That's kind of the situation with Brandon Logan. But right after the news broke about Ivan Taylor decommitting from Notre Dame, Tom Loy from 24/7 Sports reported that Notre Dame officially offered Logan a football scholarship. So now it really is just up to Brandon Logan in what sport does he want to play in college? Because if he wants to play baseball and he's not as concerned about football, then it makes perfect sense to go to Vanderbilt. They've won 2 national championships in the past 5 years, consistently one of the top baseball programs in the entire country. So if he wants to play baseball, which I certainly understand, it's a lot less taxing on your body than playing football, he's going to go to Vanderbilt. But he's from Fort Wayne. He's not far from Notre Dame. And if he wants to play football, then obviously Notre Dame is a much better situation than Vanderbilt when it comes to football. If he wants to play both sports, I still think Notre Dame is a better bet because you get to play football at Notre Dame, which is a great experience, and you could still play baseball for Notre Dame as well, even though their baseball program has certainly taken a step back over the past couple of years, ever since Link Jarrett left for Florida State. There have been plenty of two-sport athletes at Notre Dame who played football and baseball who ended up having successful careers. Look at Golden Tate, Jeff Samardzija. He ended up playing baseball. You get my point. So I think the path is certainly there. It's really just going to come down to what does Brandon Logan want to do? If he wants to play baseball, probably he's going to end up at Vanderbilt. But now, this situation with Ivan Taylor certainly makes things interesting for him. And I want to make this clear. I don't think that Notre Dame is just going to stop recruiting Ivan Taylor. Yes, this stings. Yes, it sucks to see him go to a rival. But there are still several months before signing day. Guys have flipped and then come back before. Probably more than you think. It doesn't really happen that often with Notre Dame. It did happen with Deion Colzie, although he didn't flip to another school, just decommitted and then ultimately recommitted to Notre Dame. But Ivan Taylor is too good to just let him walk. They're going to continue to recruit him really hard. And even if they end up getting Brandon Logan and Ivan Taylor decides, hey, I want to come back to Notre Dame, they're going to figure out a spot. Okay, 7 defensive backs would be a lot, but Ivan Taylor is just that good. So I think they're going to continue recruiting him, but keep an eye on Brandon Logan and see what he ends up deciding about football or baseball. So moving beyond the safety position, Notre Dame is going to get a lot more recruiting news over the course of the next few weeks. At wide receiver, I think that situation is going to be cleared up potentially by the end of this month. Dylan Robinson, Tanuk Hines, and Derek Meadows are all going to announce their decision soon. Robinson and Hines are both going to commit next week. I think Tanuk Hines is kind of moving his decision date around because of storms, and he's going to make his announcement with a teammate. I don't really understand all the reasons why his commitment date keeps moving, but it's going to be sometime either a week from now or 10 days from now. Robinson is going to commit to in the next week, and I think it just depends on who you ask in terms of where does Notre Dame stand in these recruitments. I think with Dylan Robinson, it's basically a coin flip between Notre Dame and UCLA. He could end up coming to Notre Dame. I don't really know. A couple of weeks ago, I felt like Notre Dame was in the lead, and now he seems to be wavering in that to a degree, but he could still end up at Notre Dame. Tanuk Hines is interesting because at one point I felt like he was basically a lock to go to Notre Dame, but then Texas lost one of their wide receiver commits, and then I think that they've started to recruit him a little bit more aggressive recently. USC is also a factor with him as well. And then Derek Meadows, man, I have no idea. Notre Dame was in on him so early, so much earlier than everyone else. Then his recruitment pretty much blew up, and now he's one of the highest-ranked wide receivers in the class of 2025. He visited Notre Dame. He also visited a few SEC schools, and it felt like coming out of those visits, Alabama might be in the lead. But he keeps his commitment a little bit low-key compared to some of these other guys. So I'm guessing that Notre Dame ends up landing Dylan Robinson and Tanuk Hines. I think they'll ultimately miss out on Derek Meadows, so there's a chance they go 2 for 3. I'd be pretty surprised if they go 0 for 3. But there is a realistic possibility that they go 0 for 3 with these guys. It's certainly an unfortunate possibility to think about, but it is possible, and it's just sort of the nature of this time of year with recruiting. Guys are in decision mode. They're down to a couple schools. Notre Dame is in it for a lot of these guys, and now they just have to get them over the finish line and get these guys to commit and then ultimately sign on the dotted line come December. On the other side of the ball, back onto the defense. Notre Dame is still very much in the running for elite linebackers, Manfremo and Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. I would be shocked if they didn't get at least one of them. There's a real chance they get both. Both of those guys are in decision mode. They're going to be announcing their commitments relatively soon. There was a point in time where it felt like Owusu-Boateng was going to wait until much closer to signing day to make his decision official, but I do think that he's going to end up committing at some point over the course of the next couple months. It seems like Notre Dame is in the lead, but who knows? Like, with these guys, I feel like Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, especially, he really enjoys the recruitment process. I don't blame him. He's a very highly coveted prospect, garnering a lot of attention from a lot of different schools. So if he wants to soak it all in, I get it. But these guys are very, very talented. Notre Dame has recruited them very aggressively. They both had outstanding visits at Notre Dame. And even though they've got some serious competition, I do think they're going to land at least one of them. But as I've said a couple times in this podcast already, man, recruiting is a roller coaster, especially this time of year. Guys take official visits, and it's great for a few days. They say all these great things about Notre Dame, and then the dust settles a little bit, and then it takes a turn to some of these other schools. But this is how it goes every single year. When you're recruiting among the elites like Notre Dame is, it's going to be a battle every single day. We still got several more months left before early signing day. I expect many more twists and turns, and I promise I'll have you covered here at Locked On Irish every step of the way. But that is going to do it for today's episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Because I'm releasing this on Monday night, I'm not going to release a new episode on Tuesday. If you're listening to this on Tuesday morning, then this isn't a problem for you. I'm going to release another new episode Wednesday morning. In the meantime, remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast. Also, you can give the show a follow on social media. The X account is at Locked On Irish. Instagram is Locked On Irish Pod. My personal X account is at Tyler, WOJCIAK. I'll see you Wednesday.